have to, which means, because the reason why, if you start with 5000 BC, you respect the Septuagint's dates in Genesis chapter 11. If you start with 4000 BC, you're ignoring Septuagint's dates in Genesis 11, and you have a problem because your Exodus date won't match anything anybody ever even knows remotely close what could be the plausible date. All of us would agree it's somewhere in that 1500 to 1200 range. No one says it's outside of that range. Not that I've read. There's nobody that says outside of that range. And so you're going to say 2200? That's insanity. How do you get to that? Because you have to add to this the difference of numbers. But if you're going to respect Genesis 11, then you have to start with 5000. You can't use this and then not use this. They go together. You can't, no, doesn't. So you can't use the 780 and then ignore the 5000 BC. That makes no sense. So I hope that answers your question. So where I'm at with this is just to go back and to see the pharaohs again. Let me show you something interesting. Where's the, here's that. All right, so the pharaohs on here.
Todd said, so are you saying the earth is 7,000 years old?
I'm saying correct. That's correct. Correct. So when we say day 7, we're using day 7. It's an old. We haven't changed it ever, because I'm using old referencing to that. And the reason why I just say day 7 because remember God, day 7 is this. Day 7 we think it's 6,000 years, then 7 days. If you look at that chart I wrote back in the day, I actually have it on here written the right way at the very bottom. It says the earth restored at the end of 7,000 years. I even say that. But I didn't change that nomenclature because we're so used to it, I didn't change it. So we should be saying day 8, day 9, day 10, but we're not. We're saying day 7, day 8. We haven't changed that. It's part of our nomenclature. So day 7 is actually happening for technically right now from a standpoint of we're in the 7,000th year. 7,000 years has come to fruition, completion, and then there's that. If that makes sense to what you're asking the question, that's correct. It sounds weird, I know, but it is on the bottom of that chart. We've looked at that before, but this is the only way that these dates will fit. And so, yeah, technically, we already have 6,000 years, and we're completing the 7,000 years, and then which the millennial reign will begin. And you may say, oh my gosh, well, wait. But God works 6 days and rests on the 7th day. But that's where you have this reference to, we studied in the past times, there's a 7th day, so 7 versus 7th. So 7th day means day 8. So people would say, well, wait a minute, did he actually? So, and you have a reference to God rested from what he created and he made. So there's a difference, again, in that relationship to why it is there was 7,000 years. So it's not, we can get on that subject if you want, but I hope that answers your question. I'm aware of what you're saying, but I think we haven't talked about it a lot because it's been such a far away removed factoid we've talked about in the past and not revisited in a long time. But that's where that is. That make any sense to you?
Pam said, but you said that only refers to the Greek and not in the Hebrew.
What part? What part?
I'm not sorry, just now saw her statement here. The ordinal and cardinal numbers.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So okay, that's correct. So here's the thing you want to look at when you go back to, when you look at Genesis in chapter 2, when he says in verse 4, and these are the verse 3, excuse me. And God blessed the 7th day and hallowed it, and because in it he had rested from all his work which he created and made. So that phrasing, created and made, is more the issue versus the 7th ordinal cardinal number thing. You're right, that's correct. It's not the same in Hebrew to the Greek. So the reality of him creating and then making, I don't know if we touched on this or not, I can't remember, but remember in Genesis, days 1, 2, and 3, this is another earmark of things that were different back then, how the days were counted. The first 3 days were different than days 4, 5, and 6 and onward. Do you remember? Because there was a sun and moon on day 4 onward, but the first 3 days there was not. So which is different than what's going to happen in the future as well. So when you look at the aspect of the created and made principle of it, God's talking to the Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, where he made man. In verse 27, he created man, the angelic hosts. So he created and made. And so your point about the 7,000 years, I believe what happened here is that 1,000 years after the mankind was, again, Noah was brought forth, because, again, Adam, Ha-Adam lived, where is it at on the board? I put it here, 126 years prior to Noah's, he lived 130 years. 126 years later is when Noah was born. Close to right at 1,000 years when Noah came on the scene. I believe Noah is the representation of the restoration of the earth, which is what happened in the flood. He's going to push the reset button. So the 6,000 years of him working with man is starting from when Noah came on the scene forward, which is why I've never changed the whole issue of saying day 7. I'm not referring to day 7 from Ha-Adam. I'm referring from day 7 from when Noah was brought into view as the one who would be the reset button, because he'd be the one used to reset everything on the earth. Because God's going to take him and his sons and use him and his loins, his sons, to then repopulate the planet. And by doing so, he's going to also wipe out all the hybrid offspring as well. So the 6,000 years not pointing to the beginning of Eden, but pointing to the ark of Noah being in a reset. So 7,000 years from Ha-Adam to now, yes. But 6,000 years roughly from the days of Noah to now. Because Noah was born in 3944, which is right around 6,000 years to today. So I think from Noah to now is 6,000 years, which is God's restorative work. He began his restorative work. I would argue that even though Noah was born and not yet called to be the one who built the ark, God already infused in him a righteousness that he states in Genesis and also restates in Ezekiel 14:14. So with him is the 6,000 years of the restoration of God working with man from the times of Noah. He began to work with man at that point. And then with Ha-Adam through the first man and woman in the garden, and then you have all of that to Noah. That's 1,000 years roughly, 930 years of where Ha-Adam lived, 930 years. But you still have 7,000 total number of years since man's been here, but only 6,000 from which God's put the reset button through Noah, if that helps answer your question. I'm not sure if it answers your question or not, or helps to restate what you're saying. Because remember, what he created and made, he rested from, and then he eliminated what he created and made on the earth and only allowed that which he made to live on, with one exception, the whale, which is in the waters. The hybrid offspring was gone. He eliminated all those on the earth. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure if it answers your question or not. I know it's kind of convoluted, but I don't know if it answers your question. Did that help answer your question at all?
Let me see, there's a couple of other. Pam said, does this go back to the extra day we discovered in the Passover? And then she said, okay. And
Yes.
Todd said, yes, it does.
Yes, it does go back to the extra day. There's two different, there's an extra day in the Passover, as we know. There's an extra day for those that are unclean, that have traveled from a distance or touched a dead body. As we know, they give another Passover a whole month later, so yeah. So it's a different thing. So if you look at some of the pharaohs, I'm going to go back and look at some of the pharaohs. I mentioned to you before that the first, what's interesting to me is if Moses being born here, if this is true, here's some interesting factoids just to kind of put this out there. In 1765 BC, I told you about this guy before, to 1760 BC, the first Semitic pharaoh, his name, well, I told you his name before, is Kinjar.
Todd said, when are the mountains made flat and why I like the mountains?
That's not until the end of day 7, the end of the millennial reign. So Kinjar, he was of non-royal birth. And he was the first pharaoh of the Semitic line. And it says that he was actually the dates of 765 to 1760 BC, which would mean, since Joseph died in 1790 at 110 years old. This guy came on the scene 30 years, basically 35 years later.
And Todd said, when does the earth burn up?
That's the end of day 7. The earth's going to burn up at the end of millennial reign. So God's going to renovate it at the beginning of his millennial reign, and then create a new earth at the end of millennial reign, going into the day 8, or the day of God. So the day of the Lord ends with the earth being on fire, and he's going to restore the earth totally back to where it was before. So, but here you have a first Semitic pharaoh, which I think is, again, these dates kind of make sense when you look at extracurricular dates of non-biblical history, but Egyptian history. What a coincidence. 35 years after Joseph dies, a Semitic pharaoh crops up. Well, that kind of makes some sense, doesn't it? Because in order to have a pharaoh, you would think you would have to have a precursor of someone who was at least second in command. And there sure was. There was a Joseph second in command Semite. And by the way, what a coincidence that you have on the scene. Then you have in 1720 BC, the Hyksos. The Hyksos, Semitic tribes. They come into Egypt and have a line of pharaohs. So you can see that when the scripture says, and there arose a pharaoh who didn't know Joseph, it certainly wasn't him. He was Semitic. How would you not know about your former Semitic-lined second-in-charge guy 35 years before you? Sure, you heard of him. Hyksos were also a Semitic line of tribes that started to reign from 1720 onward for the whole rest of the second intermediate kingdom, all the way down to the time where this coincidence would be Moses' time frame. It's just interesting to me. This is all factoids. Then you go into, interestingly enough, there's a man in here in 1470, and so Thutmose II. So Thutmose II. So some of these people in Thutmose III, excuse me, not the second, the third. Thutmose III, he married Hatshepsut. And Hatshepsut, they said, she was the first female pharaoh. But she was a co-regent with her husband, Thutmose III. She was also very violent, very wretched. And she never had a son. She only had one child, one female child. And her name was Neferuri. However, Neferuri was of a time frame when it would not align here with this date. She would have been after this time. But it says that because of her being her daughter, there could be an alignment there where, because there was no sons of her mother, and her mother wanted a son to take over the throne, that she had a daughter instead, that the daughter would have then adopted Moses out of the river Nile. That's plausible, but who knows? Because there's no way of knowing this, because you have to first figure out, is this the real date of Moses' birth? If that is the real date, then it couldn't have been this lady I'm talking about, because she came later. So the whole point of this so far is just to kind of let you see where I'm led to believe this, but I'm still not sold on what 1 Kings 6 and Galatians 3:17 point to. I can definitely check the box on this one and on this one, that those two align with this. I got no problem with that. I have a problem still with 1 Kings 6:1 and Galatians 3:17. It doesn't make sense. Because again, if I take 1 Kings 3:17, if I take that and I'm adding 440 years, if I take 1438 and I'm subtracting 440 years from that, or actually, excuse me, I have to do the math differently. I have to do the math differently because of the conversion. Anyways, but the point is, it comes to a different date of Solomon's reign, which makes me have to go back and change this. It's close, but then this is not the biggest issue. Galatians 3:17 is the biggest one. I got to figure out what Paul's talking about when he says 433 years later. That's interesting to me. So it's just, what's he talking about when that reference? But I'll give you a teaser as we're going to also go into, I'm going to sort this out. I thought I had this all sorted out until I started to see, I knew about this, but when I saw this word after, I'm like, oh man. And then I saw this Genesis 3:17 more carefully. I was like, wait a second. When is he talking about the promise? So I had it all sorted out until I really kind of was stuck here. I didn't want to force it and say, okay, this is the date. This to me is the date. If you only consider Genesis and Exodus, then you're good. That makes sense. But as soon as you factor in these two, other things have to gel. You have to make sense of it. You just can't say, I'm going to ignore those 2 verses. You can't do that. They have to all make sense. So far, 2 make sense, 2 don't right now. I'm still in flux on this, okay? But I'm giving you where I'm at right now. It's 1438, but it's still under construction, okay? And this is why. So, and one little teaser on Daniel. We're going to look at this also later when I sort this out as well. Now, Daniel's different. So when you read Daniel chapter 9 and referencing, I'll give you another key phrasing here. There's a key phrasing in Daniel. We're going to go over this more in detail later. But there's a reason why he says 7 weeks and 62 weeks, obviously. And there's also a reason why he says there's 6 things that have to happen. There's a finishing of transgression in verse 24. There's a making of an end to the seal. There's a reconciliation for iniquity. There's a bringing of everlasting righteousness. There's a sealing up of the vision and the anointing of the most holy. Those are the 6 things he mentions. Then he also says key phrases like in verse 25, he says, know and understand from the going forth to restore and to build unto the Messiah. And then he says also later on in verse 25 that after 67 and 62 weeks, there's a building again and rebuilding and the wall, and there's in turbulent times. And he says, and after. So those are the key phrases that we're going to look into, and I'll give you some huge hints. One, all those things he mentions are key because they happen to coalesce with what you see in Scripture. Secondly, the word after, again, comes into view because it means a time later. And then also the issues of when he says the grammar text, of when it's written in a ongoing future sense, of saying ongoing tribulous, I can't even say it, distressing times, tribulations and times. So he says that in a plural sense of ongoing. So the grammar, the text of how the Hebrew language is used is key in understanding Daniel 9, which is only because of, it's interesting. I had the Exodus already, I thought, down. And I went to Daniel, and I saw that, and I got that down. And I go, okay, got it. And then I went back over here. I wanted to vet the Exodus again with this new knowledge of how the Hebrew grammar was used and the dates. And that's when it all fell apart. That's when I was like, oh no. I thought it would just flesh out to the same answer I already had, and it didn't. And I was like, uh-oh. I gotta not, before I say this is certain, I gotta make sure I vet out these other 2 scriptures. I'm not sure about these 2 yet. But again, if I take this and this, it aligns with this all day long. That makes sense to me. And that's in total alignment to be around the time when that could have happened. But I got to make sense of 1 Kings 6:1 and Galatians 3:17 first. I got to have an answer for that. And right now I don't. I don't have an answer yet. But I'm looking at it. All right, so I just want to make sure you understand where we're at. But all this is just because of the fact that these dates will not make sense unless you see the ark and the flood and the days of Genesis the way that it was. And you'll also see again how God tied in a consequence and reward to Israel, but mainly that consequence from Psalm 106, 34 to 38. I didn't put it on the board, but also in Ezekiel 16, he talks about how the Hamites polluted the Shemites, which is the whole reason why you had an Exodus. And he also ties into your correction of me, thank you, on the Amorites, not the Ammonites, but the Amorites, which came out of Ham's line. That's the reasons for the slavery issue, which is the reasons for an Exodus. So the Exodus speaks to a slavery. The slavery from Genesis 15 speaks to a sin of the Amorites. The sin of the Amorites speaks to a problem with the Hamites marrying into the Shemites, which speaks to the knowledge of what happened during Noah's day. So that's why it all ties in. So you're going, what are you bringing this up for about Noah? That's why. You just can't, and so many times I'm taking the fall for this, you separate the things in Genesis from the things in Exodus, and you can't do that. I've done that for years. You got to see that there's a connection there. The reason why they were in, there was an Exodus, because they were in slavery. Why were they in slavery? Because God said it because of a sin of the Amorites. And what's that have to do with the Israelites? Well, then you go back to the Shemite issue and the Hamite issue, because they married into them. And you're going, wow. And then all of a sudden you see why the Ham line has a big problem, and you see why now it's important to understand what happened in Genesis chapter 9 and chapter 10. And who Nimrod really was. And he was a giant, once again, trying to start over again with what God already eliminated. And that's the reason why. What a coincidence. The world starts over again with this Yahoo trying to do the same thing that God erased, which is to rebel against God. And he leaves everybody else to do it. And I do think it makes a lot of sense that Josephus says Shem took his head off. I can see why. As if to say, enough of this. And then you have later on, out of nowhere, Abraham comes out. And on and on we go. But all these dates all go back to that. It all fits in. It all fits in. The why and the when is important to know. So the why I've ignored for years. And the when I've kind of knew, but I didn't really see everything fit in. And Nancy's comment mentioned before, when you go, wait a minute, were they really in? And by the way, what you're going to find out, remember we'd always say, well, they were in 30 years in Joseph's case, and 430 years. But yeah, you just can't do the math like that. You don't count when Joseph started reigning. You got to count when the sons of Israel dwelt in Egypt. They didn't all dwell there until he was 39. So it was 9 years after he started to reign where they all dwelt in Egypt. That's the key thing. Then you go over to Babylon issue and the 70 years issue. They didn't live in Babylon for 483 years. They were in slavery for 70 years. He says that in the Bible. We'll look at that later in the book of Daniel issue. Another question and comment that Nancy made. She said, wait a second. So both of those comments you made from past, by the way, have led to some of my saying, wait a minute, what does it actually say? And so I had to go back and look at all this. So the whole thing is the grammar, the context, the when, the why, the dates, it all goes together. But you got to honor where the scripture leads you to. And that's why I don't really care if I was wrong. Fine, I'm wrong. I said 1348. Well, obviously that's not true. I know one thing, it's off. I don't know how much it's off, but it's off. And I got to figure out, it's either this date or something close to it, because this can't be too far off. I got to figure out if these two can fit into that somehow. I'm not going to force it, but it's got to make sense. So anyway, that's where we're at. If you have any questions, let me know, but I know it's probably been a lot of different things. Hopefully it's been helpful to see how things flow and to see the dates and times of peoples and when they were born. Instead of just putting the 70 years passed by, I wanted to put a date to it as well, so you can see the dates next to the folks. And then to really examine the issue of the slavery thing. I think it was so huge to see serve, afflicted, humble, and also the consequence of the Amorites. And then to also see Egypt and Canaan and the word sojourn and dwell. Those are huge key. We all knew about the 400 and 430. We all knew that. But did you know about the three things that God said? Serve, afflict, humble. Did you really realize it? I didn't. Did you realize he said sojourn and dwell? I didn't. Realize he said Egypt and Canaan? I didn't. Those are big things. And it really kind of coalesces with this conclusion of what it might be. And I got to flesh that out. All right? So we'll end with prayer. And if you have any other things you want to comment, let me know. So we'll stop here. So Father, thank you for this time and day we have. Ask you to be with us and guide, protect us, continue to restore us. And your word and your truth and your love. We thank you for all you do, continue to do to help us. Be with us now, Father. You bring us back together safely and just bless us. In Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Sorry, I'm all like, it's kind of getting cool here.